Captain Zethkar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Void Reaper, his 6 eyes scanning the tactical display with growing excitement. The massive alien vessel, stretching nearly 2 kilometers in length, cut through the darkness of space like a predator stalking its prey. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity as his crew prepared for what they believed would be another routine conquest. "Sir, we're approaching the target system," reported Navigation Officer Vex Till, her tentacles dancing across the holographic controls. "Long-range scans confirm a Class M planet in the habitable zone, just as our scouts reported." Zethkar's mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. The Crimson Fleet had been expanding across this spiral arm of the galaxy for over 3 centuries, absorbing primitive civilizations and strip mining their worlds for resources. This latest target appeared to be no different from the hundreds of others they had conquered, a small blue-green world orbiting a yellow star, populated by what their preliminary scans suggested were bipedal mammals who had barely achieved spaceflight. "What's the designation for this system again?" Zethkar asked, his attention focused on the tactical readouts showing the positions of his fleet. "The locals call it Sol, sir." "The planet is designated as Terra, or Earth in their dominant language," Vex Till replied, consulting her datapad. "Initial surveys show they've only recently developed nuclear technology and have barely begun exploring their own star system." Zethkar nodded approvingly. The Crimson Fleet specialized in targeting worlds at this exact stage of development, advanced enough to have valuable infrastructure and resources, but primitive enough to offer no meaningful resistance. It was a formula that had served them well for generations. The fleet commander was a veteran of 47 successful invasions, each one adding to his reputation as one of the most efficient conquerors in the Crimson Fleet. His species, the Kethmori, were natural warriors, tall, reptilian beings with razor-sharp claws and an instinctive understanding of pack tactics. They had risen to dominance in their home system through brutal efficiency and had extended that same philosophy across the galaxy. "Fleet status report," Zethkar ordered, settling into his command throne. "All vessels report ready, sir," came the response from Communications Officer Nixstar. "We have the dreadnought Void Reaper, 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 36 corvettes. Total crew complement is 47,000. Our troop transports carry an additional 100,000 ground forces." It was overwhelming force for what their intelligence suggested was a barely spacefaring civilization. The humans, as they called themselves, had managed to put a few primitive satellites in orbit and had landed some crew members on their single natural satellite, but they showed no signs of faster-than-light travel or energy weapons. Most of their conflicts still involved chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles, technology that was literally millennia behind Crimson Fleet standards. "Sir, we're receiving some chatter on their communication frequencies," reported the communications officer. "Should we begin jamming?" "Not yet," Zethkar replied. "Let's listen for a while. Intelligence gathering is always useful, and their primitive transmissions won't pose any threat to our systems." The bridge fell quiet except for the low hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep of monitoring equipment. Through the massive viewport, the Sol system slowly grew larger as they approached. Zethkar could see the small yellow star growing brighter, and his tactical displays began populating with more detailed information about the system's planets. "Interesting," muttered Science Officer Delmoth, his multiple arms working at different console stations simultaneously. "This system has several large gas giants that appear to have captured numerous asteroids in stable orbits. The resource potential is significant." "And the primary target?" Zethkar asked. "Earth shows signs of extensive industrialization, sir. Large population centers, significant electromagnetic emissions, and what appears to be a robust satellite network for their technological level. The conquest should provide substantial returns in both resources and potential labor forces." Zethkar smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. The Crimson Fleet operated on a simple principle: take what was valuable, destroy what was not, and move on to the next target. This Earth seemed like it would be a profitable stop on their continued expansion. "Sir, we're beginning to receive more detailed scans of their military capabilities," reported the tactical officer. "They appear to have several thousand aircraft of various types, numerous naval vessels on their oceans, and what looks like organized ground forces. However, all of their weapons appear to be chemical or kinetic based. No energy weapons detected." Any space-based defenses? Sethkar asked. None, sir. They have some monitoring satellites, but nothing that could pose a threat to our vessels. Their largest spacecraft appears to be some kind of research station in low orbit with a crew of less than 10 individuals. Sethkar's confidence continued to grow. This would indeed be a straightforward conquest. The humans might have large numbers, but quantity meant nothing against the technological superiority of the Crimson Fleet. Their energy shields could deflect anything the humans could throw at them, while their plasma weapons could level entire cities in minutes. Begin final approach, Sethkar ordered. Deploy the fleet in standard invasion formation. I want the heavy cruisers positioned to cover major population centers, destroyers handling military installations, and corvettes managing orbital control. The massive fleet began moving into position around the Sol system. Their arrival would be impossible for human detection equipment to miss. Dozens of spacecraft, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, approaching their homeworld with obvious hostile intent. Sir, we're detecting increased activity on the planet's surface, reported the sensor operator. Multiple space agencies appear to be attempting some kind of coordinated response. They're broadcasting on numerous frequencies, but I can't detect any coherent military strategy. As expected, Sethkar said dismissively. A civilization at their technological level wouldn't have protocols for responding to an alien invasion. They're probably still debating whether we're real. The captain turned to address his bridge crew. Remember, this is a standard Category 3 conquest. We establish orbital superiority, eliminate military resistance, secure major resource centers, and begin processing the population. Intelligence estimates suggest we can complete the operation in less than one planetary rotation. His crew responded with the traditional Kethmori battle cry, a harsh series of clicks and hisses that had preceded the conquest of dozens of worlds. Sethkar felt the familiar surge of anticipation that came before each successful campaign. Sir, should we attempt communication with the planetary government? Asked the communications officer. Standard protocol, Sethkar replied. Give them one opportunity to surrender unconditionally. When they refuse, and they always refuse, we proceed with the invasion. The massive dreadnought continued its approach toward Earth, followed by the rest of the Crimson Fleet. Below them, the blue marble of humanity's homeworld slowly rotated, completely unaware of just how much their universe was about to change. Sethkar studied the tactical displays showing Earth's continents and oceans. The planet was beautiful, he had to admit. The Kethmori homeworld was a harsh desert planet with limited water, so worlds like this always impressed him with their vibrant colors and obvious biological diversity. It would be a shame to strip mine it completely, but the Crimson Fleet's expansion required resources, and sentiment was a luxury they couldn't afford. Sir, we're now within their detection range, reported the sensor operator. Their primitive radar systems should be picking us up any moment now. Excellent. Begin monitoring all their communication channels. I want to know how they react when they realize they're no longer alone in the universe. The bridge crew settled into their stations, each one a veteran of multiple successful invasions. They knew their roles perfectly, and the conquest of Earth would proceed like all the others before it. The humans would resist, as primitive species always did, and the Crimson Fleet would crush that resistance with overwhelming technological superiority. What none of them knew, as their fleet approached the small blue planet, was that Earth's designation in their target database contained a critical error. The intelligence reports they had relied on were 300 years old, gathered by a scout probe that had observed the system during humanity's medieval period. In the bureaucracy of the vast Crimson Fleet, no one had thought to verify that the information was still current. The humans they were about to encounter were not the primitive civilization described in their outdated files. 3 centuries of exponential technological development had transformed Earth from a world of knights and castles into something far more dangerous. But the Crimson Fleet wouldn't discover this until it was far too late. As the Void Reaper and its escort vessels moved into Earth's solar system, their crews prepared for what they expected to be a simple conquest. They had no idea they were about to encounter the one species in the galaxy that had turned warfare into an art form, that had spent thousands of years perfecting the ability to kill efficiently and effectively. The Crimson Fleet was about to learn why every other intelligent species in the galaxy had learned to fear a simple phrase: it's Earth. Retreat. But, first, they had to discover exactly what made Earth so terrifying. And, by the time they figured it out, it would be far too late to run. The invasion was about to begin, but it would not go at all as Captain Zethkar expected. Earth was ready for them, even if they didn't know it yet. "Sir," detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface, the sensor operator suddenly announced, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "These readings don't match our intelligence reports." Zethkar frowned. "Clarify." "The electromagnetic emissions are far more sophisticated than expected, sir. And I'm detecting what appears to be." The operator paused, checking his readings multiple times. "Sir, I'm detecting organized military formations that are significantly larger than our projections indicated." "How much larger?" Zethkar asked, though he wasn't particularly concerned. Even if the humans had twice as many primitive aircraft as expected, they still posed no threat to the fleet. "Sir, our estimates may have been off by several orders of magnitude." For the first time since entering the Sol system, Captain Zethkar felt a slight unease. Orders of magnitude? That would suggest millions of military units rather than thousands. But that was impossible. Their intelligence clearly showed a primitive civilization that had barely achieved spaceflight. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array," he ordered. "There must be some kind of interference affecting our readings." But, even as he gave the order, Zethkar couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The planet looked exactly as described in their files, but the electromagnetic signature was all wrong. It was as if Earth had somehow advanced centuries in just a few decades. The Crimson Fleet continued its approach, unaware that they were flying toward the most dangerous trap in galactic history. Earth wasn't just ready for them, Earth had been preparing for this moment for longer than the Crimson Fleet had existed. The humans had been waiting for someone exactly like the Kethmori to arrive. And, when they did, Earth would show them why humanity had earned its fearsome reputation among the stars, even though the Crimson Fleet had somehow missed that particular memo. The countdown to disaster had begun, but Captain Zethkar still believed he was the one in control. That confidence would last exactly 17 more minutes. 17 minutes after Captain Zethkar had dismissed the sensor readings as equipment malfunction, the first human response arrived. It came not as primitive radio signals or crude rocket launches, but as something that made every Kethmori on the bridge freeze in absolute terror. "Sir," the communications officer whispered, his voice barely audible. "We're receiving a transmission. It's in perfect Kethmori." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of several crew members' breathing apparatus struggling to keep up with their suddenly elevated heart rates. The main viewscreen flickered to life, showing the image of a human male in what appeared to be a military uniform. Behind him, banks of sophisticated equipment hummed with activity that looked disturbingly familiar. "Greetings, Captain Zethkar of the Crimson Fleet vessel Void Reaper," the human said, his pronunciation of the alien language flawless. "I am Admiral Harrison of the Terran Defense Force. We've been expecting you." Zethkar's mandibles clicked nervously. How did this primitive creature know his name? How did it know his ship's designation? And how in the depths of space did it speak Kethmori better than some of his own crew? "You must be confused," the human continued, seeming to read Zethkar's thoughts. "Your intelligence files are quite outdated, I'm afraid. You're operating on information that's about 300 years old. We've been monitoring your scout probes for quite some time." The captain found his voice. "Impossible. Our probe network is undetectable by primitive civilizations." Admiral Harrison smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Zethkar's scales crawl. "Captain, we detected your first probe the day it entered our solar system. We've been tracking your entire civilization's expansion for the past 2 centuries. We know about your 47 previous conquests. We know about your fleet compositions, your tactical preferences, and your cultural weaknesses." "You're bluffing," Zethkar snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" The human gestured to someone off-screen. "Perhaps you'd like to speak with someone you might recognize." The transmission shifted, and Zethkar's blood turned to ice. Standing next to the human admiral was another Kethmori, one wearing what appeared to be a Terran military uniform. The alien's scales were unmarked by battle scars, suggesting a young individual, but the intelligence in those familiar six eyes was unmistakable. "Greetings, Captain," the Kethmori said in accented but clear galactic standard. "I am Commander Veldar, formerly of the Crimson Fleet vessel Star Render. I have been living on Earth for the past 8 standard years, serving as a cultural liaison and military advisor to the Terran Defense Force." Zethkar's command throne seemed to shift under him. The Star Render had been part of the fleet that had conquered the Velkan system nearly a decade ago. It had been listed as lost with all hands when it failed to return from a routine patrol mission. "That ship was destroyed," Zethkar protested weakly. "No, Captain," Veldar replied. "That ship was captured. Its crew was given a choice: integration into Earth's defense forces or comfortable imprisonment until this war ends. I chose integration. So did most of my crew." Admiral Harrison stepped back into view. "You see, Captain, we've had quite a bit of time to prepare for this moment. When we realized that your civilization was systematically conquering every inhabited world in this region of space, we decided to take proactive measures." The human touched a control on his console, and Zethkar's tactical displays began populating with new information. What he saw made his stomach churn with a fear he had never experienced before. The orbital space around Earth was not empty, as his initial scans had suggested. Instead, it was filled with hundreds of defense platforms, each one bristling with weapons that his computer identified as advanced plasma cannons, particle beam arrays, and something called kinetic kill vehicles that his database had no reference for. The platforms had been invisible to his sensors because they were using stealth technology that was generations ahead of anything the Crimson Fleet possessed. "Your cloaking systems," Zethkar breathed. "Borrowed from the Velkan resistance," Admiral Harrison said conversationally. "They were quite helpful after we liberated their surviving population from your slave camps. It turns out that when you give refugees from a dozen conquered worlds access to human engineering capabilities and unlimited resources, they become remarkably innovative." The tactical display updated again, and Zethkar saw that Earth's moon was not the barren rock his scans had indicated. The entire lunar surface was covered with military installations, shipyards, and what appeared to be massive railgun emplacements aimed directly at his fleet's current position. "Impossible," he whispered. "We would have detected construction on this scale." "Would you?" The human shrugged. "Your scout probes are programmed to look for specific technological signatures. We simply made sure our construction projects didn't emit those signatures. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you know exactly what your enemy is looking for." Veldar stepped forward again. "Captain, I must inform you that your entire invasion fleet is currently targeted by approximately 40,000 individual weapons systems. Each one is capable of penetrating Crimson Fleet shields and armor. This is not a battle you can win." Zethkar's tactical officer looked up from his console with wide, terrified eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Multiple gravitational anomalies suggest the presence of large vessels using advanced stealth systems. Sir, we're surrounded." "Surrender now," Admiral Harrison said, his voice remaining conversational despite the implicit threat, "and your crews will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on Military Prisoners. Continue with your invasion attempt, and we will demonstrate why every intelligent species in this galaxy has learned to fear the phrase its Earth." "Retreat." "You're bluffing," Zethkar said, but even he could hear the desperation in his own voice. "A primitive civilization couldn't possibly." "Captain," Harrison interrupted, "we're not primitive. We never were. Your intelligence files are based on observations made during our medieval period, when we were fighting with metal swords and chemical explosives. Do you know what we've been doing for the past 3 centuries? The human's expression hardened, and, for the first time, Zethkar saw something that made him understand why this species might be dangerous. There was a cold calculation in the human's eyes, a predatory intelligence that reminded him uncomfortably of his own species' warrior traditions. "We've been perfecting the art of warfare," Harrison continued. "While your civilization was content to rely on superior technology to overwhelm primitive opponents, we were learning everything we could about combat, tactics, strategy, and the psychology of conflict. We studied every battle your fleet ever fought. We analyzed your strengths, your weaknesses, and your predictable tactical responses. The main viewscreen split, showing tactical readouts that made Zethkar's blood run cold. Earth's defense network wasn't just large, it was sophisticated beyond anything he had encountered in 47 previous invasions. Every one of his ships was being tracked by multiple targeting systems. Every possible escape vector was covered. Even more terrifying, the targeting solutions were updating in real time, adjusting for every minor course change his fleet made. You see, Captain, Admiral Harrison said, we've had 200 years to prepare for your arrival. We knew you were coming long before you decided to target our system. We've been tracking your expansion, studying your methods, and preparing our defenses. This entire star system has been converted into the largest military installation in galactic history. Veldar added, Captain, I must emphasize that the humans are not exaggerating. I have spent 8 years observing their military capabilities, and I can assure you that what you see represents only a small fraction of their actual defensive strength. Earth's true military power is difficult for our species to comprehend. What do you mean? Zethkar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. I mean, Captain, that the humans don't just build weapons or develop tactics. They weaponize everything. Their entire civilization is organized around the principle of defensive preparation. Every civilian facility has military applications. Every citizen receives combat training. Every technology is evaluated for its warfare potential. Admiral Harrison nodded. For the past 300 years, every scientific advance, every engineering breakthrough, every social development has been guided by a single question: how can this help us defend our world against alien invasion? The result is a civilization that, while appearing peaceful on the surface, is actually the most militarized society in galactic history. The tactical displays updated again, and Zethkar saw something that made him question his own sanity. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter wasn't just a collection of space rocks. It was a massive network of hidden military installations, each one capable of launching swarms of automated attack drones. The gas giant Jupiter itself had been converted into a resource extraction facility feeding materials to shipyards hidden in its moons. Even our children, Harrison continued conversationally, receive military education as part of their standard curriculum. By the time they reach adulthood, every human is capable of serving in our defense forces. Our total mobilization potential is approximately 8 billion individuals, each one trained in combat operations and familiar with advanced weaponry. Zethkar tried to process this information. 8 billion soldiers? The entire Crimson Fleet consisted of fewer than 10 million individuals across all their ships and installations. You're describing a warrior species, he said quietly. No, Captain, Veldar corrected. I've studied human society extensively. They're not naturally warlike. They're defensive. Everything they've built, everything they become, is oriented around protecting their homeworld and their civilization from external threats. They turned themselves into warriors because they knew someday they would need to be. Admiral Harrison's expression softened slightly. We didn't want this, Captain Zethkar. We would have preferred to develop peacefully, to explore the galaxy, to meet other species as friends and allies. But, when we discovered what the Crimson Fleet was doing to every civilization in this region, we realized we had no choice but to prepare for war. Your fleet, Veldar said, represents everything that Earth has been preparing to defend against for 3 centuries. You are exactly the threat they built their entire civilization to counter. The communications channel fell silent for several moments as Zethkar processed this information. His invasion fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming when they entered the system, now felt like a handful of predators that had wandered into a trap designed specifically for them. What are you saying? He asked finally. I'm saying, Captain, Admiral Harrison replied, that you have approximately 30 seconds to begin broadcasting your surrender before we demonstrate why the phrase "it's Earth. Retreat" has become the most feared warning in the galaxy. On his tactical displays, Zethkar watched as energy signatures began building throughout the Sol system. Thousands of weapons systems powered up simultaneously, each one capable of destroying his largest vessels. More terrifying still, his computer identified the power signatures as being only a fraction of Earth's total defensive capability. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "we can't win this battle. We can't even survive it." Captain Zethkar, veteran of 47 successful conquests, stared at the display showing Earth's true military might and realized that his invasion fleet was about to become a historical footnote in humanity's continuing preparations for the next threat to arrive from the stars. The countdown to surrender had begun, but Zethkar was still trying to process how a simple conquest had turned into the most dangerous trap in galactic history. Earth wasn't just ready for them. Earth had been designed specifically to destroy them. 24 hours after Captain Zethkar had transmitted his fleet's unconditional surrender, he found himself in the most humbling experience of his long military career. He was sitting in what humans called a conference room aboard their orbital command station, surrounded by representatives from a dozen different alien species, all of them refugees from Crimson Fleet conquests, and all of them now serving as advisors to the Terran Defense Force. Admiral Harrison sat across from him, flanked by Veldar and several other aliens that Zethkar recognized from species the Crimson Fleet had supposedly eliminated over the past century. The room itself was a testament to human engineering. Gravity generators maintained perfect standard gravity, the air was clean and properly mixed for multiple alien physiologies, and the furniture had been designed to accommodate the physical requirements of a dozen different species simultaneously. "I still don't understand," Zethkar said, his voice carrying none of the confidence he had possessed just one day earlier. "How did you know? How could you possibly have prepared so extensively for our arrival?" Admiral Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Captain, I think you're still not grasping the full scope of what you encountered. This wasn't just about preparing for the Crimson Fleet specifically. Earth has been preparing for any potential hostile alien contact for over 3 centuries. A new voice joined the conversation, this one belonging to a Yithkari, one of the first species the Crimson Fleet had conquered nearly 2 centuries ago. Commander Esikatala had been introduced as the head of Earth's Xenological Intelligence Division, and her presence here was almost as shocking as everything else Zethkar had witnessed. "Captain," Esikatala said in heavily accented galactic standard, "when my people's refugee ships first arrived at Earth 67 years ago, we expected to find a primitive world that would fall to the Crimson Fleet within decades. Instead, we found a civilization that had already been preparing for that exact scenario for over 200 years. But how?" Zethkar asked. "How could they know what they had never encountered?" "Because humans think differently than most species," Veldar explained. "When they first achieved spaceflight and realized the galaxy was full of intelligent life, their immediate reaction wasn't wonder or excitement. It was strategic analysis. They asked themselves, if there are aliens out there, what's the worst possible scenario we might encounter?" Admiral Harrison nodded. "We assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel would possess technology and resources far beyond our capabilities. We assumed they might be hostile. We assumed they might view us as either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be exploited. So we began preparing for those possibilities. Every aspect of our technological development for the past 3 centuries has been guided by defensive considerations," added Dr. Chinwei, a human scientist who had been introduced as the director of Earth's Alien Technology Integration Program. "Every breakthrough in physics, every advance in engineering, every social innovation has been evaluated for its potential military applications." Esikatala activated a holographic display that showed the evolution of Earth's technology over the past 300 years. "What the humans accomplished, Captain, was something unprecedented in galactic history. They turned their entire civilization into a defensive military installation while maintaining the appearance of a peaceful, developing society." The display showed a timeline of human technological development, and Zethkar found himself amazed by what he saw. At every stage, the humans had developed not just civilian technology, but military applications for every innovation. Their computer networks weren't just for communication, they were designed to coordinate global defense responses. Their industrial base wasn't just for manufacturing consumer goods, it could be converted to weapons production within hours. Even their educational system was designed to produce citizens who could serve as soldiers, engineers, or support personnel in a defensive war. "But why?" Zethkar asked. "Why organize your entire civilization around warfare?" "Because we studied history," Admiral Harrison replied simply. "Not just our own history, but the history of every species that managed to survive first contact with hostile aliens. The survivors all had one thing in common: they had prepared extensively for the worst-case scenario before that contact occurred. Commander Veldar leaned forward. "Captain, the humans didn't guess what the Crimson Fleet would be like. They designed their defenses to counter every possible type of alien invasion strategy that could theoretically exist. The fact that your fleet employed tactics they had specifically prepared for was not coincidence, it was comprehensive preparation." Dr. Chen brought up another display, this one showing Earth's hidden military installations throughout the solar system. "For example, we assumed that any alien invasion would begin with establishing orbital superiority using superior technology. So we built our defenses to be completely invisible to the types of sensors that advanced aliens would likely use, while ensuring those defenses could destroy vessels far more advanced than anything we could build ourselves. We assumed alien invaders would underestimate primitive civilizations," Seketala added, "so we made sure our actual capabilities would remain hidden until the moment we chose to reveal them. We assumed alien species might have superior individual technologies," Admiral Harrison continued, "but we also assumed they would rely on that technological advantage rather than developing comprehensive strategic planning. So we designed our defenses to exploit that overconfidence." Zethkar looked around the room at the representatives of species the Crimson Fleet had supposedly conquered or eliminated. "But, how did you rescue these people? How did you even know they existed?" "We've been conducting covert operations in this region of space for over 50 years, Admiral Harrison explained. "Small, stealthy reconnaissance vessels designed to gather intelligence without being detected. We've been mapping Crimson Fleet activities, locating refugee populations, and conducting rescue operations whenever possible." Commander Yexval, a member of the Kethmori species that the Crimson Fleet had conquered 35 years earlier, spoke up. "Captain, the humans didn't just rescue us. They integrated us into their defense planning. Every species that found refuge on Earth contributed their knowledge, their technology, and their understanding of Crimson Fleet tactics to the collective defense effort. Earth became something unique in galactic history," Seketala explained. "A coalition world where dozens of species worked together to develop defenses against a common threat. The technological and tactical innovations that resulted from this cooperation far exceeded what any single species could have achieved." Zethkar felt a growing sense of vertigo as he began to understand the true scope of what his fleet had encountered. "You're saying that Earth didn't just defeat the Crimson Fleet? You're saying Earth was specifically designed to defeat us?" "More than that, Captain," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Earth was designed to defeat any possible version of a threat like the Crimson Fleet. We prepared for every conceivable variation of technological superiority, military doctrine, and invasion strategy. Your fleet represented just one of thousands of scenarios we had prepared to counter." Admiral Harrison activated another display, this one showing the current state of the Crimson Fleet throughout the galaxy. "Captain, while you were approaching Earth, we were implementing the final phase of our defensive strategy. Our covert operations have been active throughout Crimson Fleet territory for decades. Every conquered world, every slave camp, every military installation has been mapped and analyzed." "What are you saying?" Zethkar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be even more shocking than everything else he had learned. "I'm saying that your invasion of Earth was never the real battle, Captain. It was the trigger for a much larger operation." Harrison's expression became grimly satisfied. "At the moment your fleet entered our solar system, liberation forces that we've been positioning throughout the galaxy for the past 20 years began simultaneous operations to free every world the Crimson Fleet has ever conquered." The display updated to show real-time tactical situations throughout Crimson Fleet space. Dozens of worlds were reporting coordinated uprisings supported by mysterious human-led coalition forces. Crimson Fleet installations were being destroyed by rebels using advanced weapons of unknown origin. Supply lines were being severed by small, fast vessels that appeared and disappeared without warning. Earth's defense was never about protecting just one world, as Seketala explained. It was about creating a strategic center for liberating the entire region of space that the Crimson Fleet has been terrorizing for centuries. "Your fleet's arrival at Earth was the signal we had been waiting for," Veldar added. "It told us that the Crimson Fleet had fully committed to expanding in this direction. That meant their forces were spread thin across their existing territory, making them vulnerable to coordinated rebellion." Zethkar stared at the tactical displays showing the systematic collapse of the Crimson Fleet Empire. In less than 48 hours, the work of 3 centuries was being undone by a species that had supposedly just achieved spaceflight. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No, Captain," Admiral Harrison said gently. "This is what happens when a defensive civilization has 3 centuries to prepare for a single strategic moment. Every piece of technology we developed, every alliance we built, every operation we conducted was designed to culminate in this moment, the complete liberation of this region of space from the Crimson Fleet threat." Dr. Chen brought up one final display, this one showing projections for the next several decades. "Captain, within the next 5 years, every former Crimson Fleet territory will be liberated and integrated into what we're calling the Galactic Defense Coalition. Every species your empire conquered will have the option to join a democratic alliance designed to prevent this kind of systematic conquest from ever happening again." "But, why?" Zethkar asked, his voice barely audible. "Why go to such extraordinary lengths? Why not simply build defenses for your own world and ignore the rest of the galaxy?" The room fell silent for a moment before Admiral Harrison answered. "Because, Captain, we learned something important from studying the history of species that survived alien contact. The ones that only defended themselves eventually fell to the next threat, or the one after that. The only species that achieved long-term security were the ones that eliminated the threat entirely and built systems to prevent it from recurring. Earth didn't just want to survive the Crimson Fleet," Eseketala added. "Earth wanted to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between conquest and extermination." Commander Veldar leaned forward. "Captain, I have lived among humans for 8 years, and I can tell you something that your intelligence files could never have prepared you for. Humans don't just defend. They protect. There is a difference." "What do you mean?" Zethkar asked. "I mean that humans extend their protective instincts to include anyone they consider part of their community. When refugee species arrived at Earth, the humans didn't just offer them shelter. They adopted them. Every freed slave, every refugee, every survivor of Crimson Fleet conquest became part of Earth's extended family. And humans will go to extraordinary lengths to protect their family." Admiral Harrison stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the blue marble of Earth rotating slowly below them. "Captain, your species made one critical error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that a primitive civilization would be easy to conquer. But you never asked yourselves why Earth was still inhabited by its original species after millions of years of evolution." "I don't understand," Zethkar said. "Earth is a death world, Captain. Our planet has been trying to kill us since the day our species evolved intelligence. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive meteor impacts, magnetic pole reversals, gamma-ray bursts from nearby supernovas, Earth has survived disasters that would have sterilized most habitable worlds. The only species that could survive on Earth are the ones that became very, very good at not dying." Dr. Chen added, "Every challenge our planet threw at us made us stronger, more adaptable, more resilient. By the time we achieved spaceflight, we were already a species that had been forged by millions of years of existential threats. When we realized the galaxy contained new threats, we simply applied the same survival skills that had kept us alive for our entire evolutionary history. Earth didn't make us warriors, Captain," Admiral Harrison concluded, turning back to face the group. "Earth made us survivors. And survivors don't just endure threats, they eliminate them." Zethkar looked around the room at the representatives of a dozen species, all of them working together as part of Earth's extended community. For the first time in his military career, he began to understand what he had really encountered. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now, Captain," Admiral Harrison said, "you and your crews are given the same choice that Earth has offered every refugee and every former enemy. You can join the Galactic Defense Coalition and help us build a galaxy where conquest and slavery are no longer possible. Or you can be repatriated to a world where you can live peacefully without threatening others. And if we choose to continue fighting? Then, you'll learn why every intelligent species in the galaxy has learned to fear the phrase 'it's Earth.' Retreat." Harrison's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "But I hope you'll make a different choice. The galaxy has seen enough conquest. It's time to build something better." Captain Zethkar, veteran of 47 conquests and leader of the most feared fleet in Crimson Fleet history, looked out the viewport at the small blue world that had just demonstrated why it was the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. For the first time in his life, he understood what peace might look like. And, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to be truly safe. The age of conquest was over. The age of protection had begun. And it had all started with a single phrase that echoed across the galaxy: it's Earth. Retreat. But, now, finally, no one would ever need to retreat from Earth again. Because Earth would never stop protecting everyone who needed protection, no matter where in the galaxy they might be.